Hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I am the founder of Professional Launch. Today, we have Robert Pope. He allowed me to call him Bob. So, throughout the conversation, I'm going to call him Bob. He's the co-president of Nexus Innovation. It's such a pleasure to have Robert here. But before we start the conversation, I want to remind you folks that we are a non-profit organization. We rely heavily on guests, friends, and partners to keep our operation going. So if you are a donor, if you support us in the past, we thank you so much. If not, check us out and see how you can become a friend of ours to help us continue developing our mentoring platform and also keep our operation going, keep the podcast going to have professional like Robert on to bring you the best of his experience and his knowledge to help you develop your own career. Now, on to the conversation. Robert, Bob, thank you for being on Professional Lunch today.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Please tell the Professional Lunch audience a little bit about yourself.
Oh, that's a wide open. So I was born over in Minnesota and do schooling there. I'll pick it up when I came over to North Dakota. I never expected to be a North Dakota resident in my life, but I went to marketing school in my mid-20s and got done, decided to continue on and finish with a 4-year degree. I could have gone to University of Minnesota, and it would have taken 3 more years. By coming up to NDSU, I could finish in 2. We already had 2 children by that time, so an extra year was not very appealing. So that's how we ended up in Fargo, and graduated from NDSU in 1983 with a degree in business administration.
Wonderful, wonderful. You are the co-president of Nexus Innovation. Are you the founder?
Yes, my wife and I founded that in July of 2000.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can you take us back to the beginning? What inspired you and your wife to start this company?
When I was in college here and in Minnesota, I began doing some painting. So having my own painting business was my first jump into being an entrepreneur. So it was a very basic, simple service and fit in well with the college schedule, all those kind of things. And so came up here and I needed to find new customers because for some reason my customers in Minnesota didn't move with me. And so I printed up some business cards and I walked down on South 8th Street where there were large, old, classic homes. And I said, well, it's a big home that they bought, so they must have some money. And it's an old home, so they must need some things painted. And I found one client, and that person then referred me to a neighbor. So I had 2 customers that lasted me for months. And it was wonderful. So I really needed an internship, far more than I ever realized. And it turned out that my boss, that for my painting business, was the hiring manager at IBM here in town. And his wife told him that he needed to hire me. So he did what she said. And and hired me for that internship. And that was really a big, big step for me because I did not grow up in a home where business was a table topic or anything like that. I really needed that experience very badly. So did that internship, graduated, and began working for Honeywell. And I was with Honeywell doing on-the-road sales for over 12 years. Got done with that job, and I said, I want to be a consultant. But I knew nothing about consulting other than what I'd picked up along the way in general terms during my Honeywell years. But really had no expertise that people would say, yeah, I want to hire you for this. So it did not go very well. And thankfully, a consulting firm, then was working up in this area. And they hired me to head up their office here. So I did that for 3.5 years. And one day they called me up and said, well, we're shutting down the office there in Bismarck. Oh boy, that means I'm going to be out of a job. And I already did that before, and that wasn't very fun. We had 4 kids by then, and they like to eat a lot. And so we prayed hard, and we turned around to them and said, how about if we buy it from you instead?
Mm.
And they were just going to shut it down, and they had a lease to pay off, and they had things. So that was pretty attractive to them, as long as we assumed the lease and so forth. So we did that, and that was, we'll call our unplanned entry into full-time consulting.
Mm. Wow. And so what went on from there? I mean, how did you get to Nexus?
So we had a small bit of business that was underway already,
Mm-hmm.
and we carried on with those contracts for a bit, but we were really struggling. And we just did not have a good value proposition. And as everyone that's been in school for business has learned, is that in order to be a successful business, you have to have a product or a service that people are willing to give you a check for it.
Yep.
There has to be an exchange of value in order to get them to keep handing you money.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you keep the doors open is by people consistently providing you with enough funds to cover your expenses. And so we gradually shifted. Originally, we were doing just primarily strategic work, strategic consulting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to stay busy because those projects are kind of a one and done.
Mm.
And so we gradually moved toward the technical aspect and became Microsoft partners and began hiring technical people because neither of us were technical at all. And so we found some good ones to hire and began building that up. And we still nearly went bankrupt. Year 6, we were really, really close.
Mm.
And managed to squeak through it, we'll call that, and began to get on solid ground as far as having a solid reputation and a solid value proposition.
Hmm. Wonderful. So, on your way to building this business, or while building this business, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced and how did you try to overcome them? Especially, we talk about almost close to bankruptcy. I mean, things were not going so great.
I keep talking about it, but it's so huge that we had to figure out what were people willing to pay for.
Hmm.
And, there's a saying about in order to stay long term, in order to stay in business long term, you need to reinvent yourself about every 5 years because the market is changing quickly, and especially in IT. And so it's that step of saying, okay, where is the market going? Where are the needs going? We've always had this developed a belief that we need to be operating at a level that is just above the level of expertise that our customer has. If we are working in the realm in which they have skills, then our services are not of much value. When we're working at a level 1 or 2 steps ahead of them, then the magic happens.
Hmm.
Then they see that, oh, man, they're really helping us improve our game. They're really helping us get to that next level. And so as we grow over the business, we have many customers that have been with us 5, 10, 15, up to 20 years. And so as they are growing and as their processes are maturing, as our systems are maturing, as our people are maturing, we need to be there and be ready and growing so that we can help them to their next level. And if we're 3 miles ahead of a customer, we're no good.
Mm-hmm.
There's too big of a gap. If we're behind them, we're no good. And so there has to be that match. And so part of the key to staying in business long term is being able to, first of all, select really good clients.
Mhm.
Because if they're a bad fit, it's it's just not going to work for anybody.
So, what was the defining moment that um, when you realized Nexus Innovation was gonna succeed, or your business was gonna be succeed?
Well, coming out of bankruptcy certainly was memorable. I
Mhm.
shouldn't say bankruptcy, near bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Um, then we always had a goal that we wanted to operate debt free.
Hmm.
And so we, due to poor decisions, due to a lack of direction, a lack of knowledge, that is how we acquired so much debt in the first place. But later on, we we saw that, hey, this is possible. And so we kept going for that. And in order to do that, a person has to be careful on expenditures, has to be cautious on, you know, making sure that you're not taking too much out of the money. There's always a decision of, well, at times it was like, do we get paid this month? Sometimes we didn't.
Hmm.
And, or we had expense reports that were piling up unpaid and that kind of thing, where it was like, yeah, we can't pay it to ourselves because we just don't have the money. And so, um, getting to a place of financial freedom was a really big priority. And we just said, hey, we're going to get there and we're going to stay there.
Mm. So, what can you share in the, whether it's your some of the position that you occupied before you went ahead and found that company? What can you share about what you have learned along the way that prepares you for um, the position that you have in Nexus Innovation?
I had a boss at Honeywell, and he was so good at taking the outlook of what is the best thing for the customer. And not every organization that has sales reps thinks that way.
Mm.
Sometimes it's what's best for us, what's best for me as a sales rep, so forth. And his name was Ken, and he would say, go do the right thing. And when you're in the corporate world, Honeywell was like in the Fortune 500 at that point. And there's lots of pressure, lots of financial pressure to make the numbers. And Ken would shield us from the crazy corporate pressure. And he'd say, let's just go fix it. Let's go make this right. Let's go work with this client to make it be something that they will recommend us, something where they will with us for the long term. And I saw how important it was to make those tough decisions, to take the financial hit in order to put yourself in a much stronger position for the long term.
Mm. So, in other words, you get to learn from him. You get to learn from him, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, today we're gonna shift a little bit on your professional journey, and we're gonna talk about your professional background in running a successful IT company. But first, we have a message for the professional launch audience. This is a quick reminder that Professional Lunch is a nonprofit organization, and we rely heavily on guests, friends, and partners to support our operation, to keep going, to fuel our mission. And when you support Professional Lunch, what do you support? You support the development of a mentoring platform, you support our operation, and you support the podcast where we get to bring great guests on to share their professional journey with you and give you advice on how you can launch your own career. Now, on to the professional journey of Bob. So, how did your professional background prepares you to launch and run a successful IT company? Hmm.
Part of it is because my boss, Ken, when he learned what I was doing later, we've stayed friends all through these years. And it's been, what, over 30 years now? And he said, "You running an IT company?" He thought that was a pretty good joke. And it actually was, because of the fact that we did not have technical background or technical knowledge. And so what it did is put us in a place where hiring and relying on really good people
Hmm.
that have good judgment and are able to uh, do really good things for the clients was crucial.
Hmm.
The other thing, real practical, at Honeywell is where I learned about we'll call it the relationship between the front end office and operations.
Hmm.
And front end being obviously sales, administration, all of that. And operations are the one that then have to go fulfill the contracts that the salespeople bring back and signed by the customer. And so in some companies, those relationships are really, really messed up
Hmm.
and not good at all. And we really had quite a healthy um, connection there. And I found that even though I wasn't a very good salesman, I really enjoyed project management. I really enjoyed taking care of the customer. And so, especially as a small business, those customers have a definite expectation of personal, uh, very responsive service, where you're really out for them. You are looking out for their good in every single way, and you're communicating well and showing them, you're developing that personal relationship with them, that
Mhm.
they know that they can trust that you're gonna do exactly what they're hoping.
Hmm, wonderful. I like that. Focus on the customer. So, what values have guided you and your spouse in growing Nexus Innovation over the years? 2020, 2000 to 2024, you or 25?
Uh, 25 now.
20
Yep.
25. So that's 25 years. You have been in business. So, what values that you and your spouse have guided you in along those years?
Well, the old golden rule is certainly a huge one. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Mm-hmm.
The being honest with them, being someone that is very responsive and develops trust with them at multiple levels. And so, if you really listen, really want to listen well to what are their issues, and then dig deeper with them to make sure you're not just treating a surface issue, but getting down to root issues. That's that's huge for them.
Hmm. Wonderful. So, you mentioned your spouse and you creating a business together. So, how do you balance being business owner with your personal life, especially when the business is the two of you?
And and I'm sure it'll come up later, but also our son Jordan's been with us now for 17 years.
Oh my goodness! So it's a family business.
It's Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Okay.
And so um, we it was an adjustment,
Mm-hmm.
but for Lori and I, it's been a very healthy thing for our relationship because we were really united in doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were going through that very difficult time, not knowing whether we're going to make it or not, she looked at me and she said, "You know what? Even if this whole thing goes down, I'm glad we did it."
Mm.
And that happened 18 years ago or more.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that so clearly. And because it's our life mission, and we have really enjoyed that. We've getting to know the employees, getting to know the customers in a personal way
Mm-hmm.
is very, very rich.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. I love that. So, what would be um one piece of advice um that you wish you had known when you first started?
You know, the when it goes back to relationships, we have been doing some studying for the last over 12 years in the whole area of establishing healthy relationships. And that every healthy relationship is based on a foundation of trust.
Mm-hmm.
When we have trust, then we can have healthy conflict.
Mm.
Healthy conflict is really hard. Really hard. It's so many times we, especially up here with our Scandinavian culture, where we have a tendency to avoid conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh man, I just don't want to go there. And for me, that was as I grew up, that was just standard. You just don't, you try to avoid that conflict at almost any cost. And there's a severe cost to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two basics have been absolutely huge for us in getting those established, following through. And it's the old, blocking and tackling, the very basics, you got to keep going back to and say, we cannot mess up in these.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So, you've been in business with your spouse and your son for 25 years. And you work with different organizations. What do you see as the big difference between a family business and another traditional business?
One of the big ones is the whole fact that we are free to look at things from a long-term perspective
Mm.
versus facing pressure for short-term results.
Mm.
So that alone is something that has stood out to me greatly after going through the corporate experience. If a person has pressure from stockholders, if you have pressure from investors, they want to see things happen, it's a real game changer.
Mm.
And, we need to be accountable for doing what's best for providing opportunity for our employees and for others. But it's a balance where I appreciate the freedom. I've said for years, I'd rather have the pressure of needing to make payroll for the company, for the employees, versus the pressure of the corporation saying, we want X% growth again this year for this and for that. And there's maybe the market isn't there that year. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's something adjusted. And so I didn't like that created pressure.
Mm. Hmm. So, Nexus Innovations have been around for 2.5 decades now. What are some of the key strategies that help you remain um, competitive in the IT space?
One of the areas that we stress to our employees, again, being in the IT world, is having to continually advance our skills. And so there's a growth called mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and it explains that whole concept of continually learning and taking so growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
is something in which a person takes the learnings that are so vital to being able to help the clients make that improvement in their organization, their process. But it's a way of looking at things that instead of self-limiting yourself, it's having a continual hunger to absorb and to go find and discover and research things that can help you grow both personally and professionally.
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. So, um, how did you decide? Because you said you went to school for marketing and then business administration. So, how did you decide to specialize in custom software programming and well, you work on strategic planning for a little bit, but how did you decide on software programming?
There's an old saying that need is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
And so we needed to find something that would provide a better revenue, consistent revenue stream.
Hmm.
And so that's where we gradually moved more technical. And so it was getting to know our clients and finding out, okay, what is it they're really looking for?
Mm-hmm.
What do they need?
Mm-hmm.
And software has certainly evolved a lot over that last 20, 25 years. But we selected the Microsoft platform be on the advice of one of our employees back then. And we didn't even know what a Microsoft partnership meant. Had no clue. And we began down that journey, and there was a lot of learning that we had to do. And it was just a brand new world to us.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully back then, Microsoft provided a lot of personal support from a real person who held our hand and guided us through that transition. And it was super helpful. It was very helpful to have the campus here in Fargo.
The Microsoft campus.
Yep.
Okay.
So people like Don Morton, who was the site leader at that point,
Mm-hmm.
was just wonderful to us in helping us figure out that new world.
Mm. So Microsoft plays a really big role as a partner.
They've been
in
huge.
Okay. Yeah. So can you share an example of a project that you feel really reflects the strength of how have has your approach to project management, change management evolve over time?
Project management is a fascinating area
Mm-hmm.
because we have what we call project management light.
Mm-hmm.
We have like LPO, large project oversight, which is more toward the other end of the spectrum with the more complex projects.
Yeah.
And it's very important that a person have a project approach that is appropriate to that type of project itself, the complexity of it, as well as is appropriate to the organization.
Mm.
Some organizations do not have any kind of project management. If you bring in something real tough, strict, and heavy, it's just not going to go well at all.
Mm-hmm.
Where other organizations are very mature in that and understand it. And they, if you're building a bridge across the Red River, you have to have a fantastic project management structure and approach to it, or it's going to be a total disaster. And so I became a PMP, a project management professional. I passed my certification, so forth, and then found out, Bob, you're really not that good at it. And it just kind of, it's rather boring. And so I stepped out of it.
Mm-hmm.
There are other people that are it's a wonderful fit.
Mm-hmm.
And a good project manager just makes an incredible amount of difference. There are so many facets to project management, that so many different skill sets that are extremely broad that they have to bring to it in order to be a true professional in that. Some of them are very touchy-feely.
Mm-hmm.
It's being a cheerleader at times, encouraging the troops and helping them. Other times, It's, you know, carrying a bat around and
Making sure everybody's
is doing what they need to in the right timing and all that.
yeah.
And then keeping track and everything in between and all of the timelines and communicating and handling the internal politics of your organization because that affects what
Mhm.
happens on this project as it goes along and as it hits those speed bumps and so forth.
Mm.
So there are many, many different facets to it for the individual as well as for the company at large.
Mm. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's switch now to leadership and team building. A company surviving 25 years, that's a quarter of a century. I mean, along, those years, they come with challenges and also they come with leadership and team building abilities. How do you foster a strong company culture? I know it's a family business, but how do you do that?
With a lot of dedication, a lot of time commitment
Yeah.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife Lori is the one that's headed all that up, and she is working on it constantly. If you have a leadership development program, if you have a organizational health endeavor, the in her case, she's the majority owner of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has that strong personal commitment to it. And so it keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
In other cases, if you have an owner that sort of, I'm sort of committed to it,
Mm-hmm.
but then all of a sudden you have a tough quarter, you have a tough year, and you decide, we got to skip that for now. Let's just forget that for now. We can't afford that.
Mm.
We can't let people go to that meeting each week for half an hour. We can't do this, can't do that. Well, it's just going to die in the vine.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some very serious decisions that have to be made as to what is the level of commitment and how are we going to carry that out.
Wonderful. So, when it comes to hiring a new team member, do you hire the members or does your wife do it?
That's a broader than that as far as that done. I announced about 2 months ago that I'm moving into an advisory role.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gradually slowing down,
Okay.
and that's been working well because I began the process of handing my duties over to Jordan over 12 years ago.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
been a very deliberate, step by step process.
Mm.
So just about 2 weeks ago, I handed him the file for hiring people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will still help. One of my great joys is doing initial interviews with people and just having an initial conversation and learn more about them, learn about their goals, some of their core skills and so forth. And is there a potential match at a high level?
Mm.
And so that's one role that I've been continuing. I'll gradually step out of that one as well.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. So, what has been the most um, rewarding part of leading a team in the IT industry?
The relationships,
Relationship.
getting to know them as a professional, but getting to know them personally, getting to know their families. We take them and their families out to Medora each summer, uh, go out to the amphitheater there and watch the show and go to the fondue and just be able to enjoy the beautiful out of doors in Theodore Roosevelt's National Park.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that it's kind of funny because some of these kids are now in their 20s
Mm.
and graduate from college and they still want to come. And you're like, and then you realize, well, they started coming when they were, 3 years old. They started coming at 8 or 10 or something, and it's become part of the tradition of summer.
Mm. So, um, what? How have changes in technology, as you mentioned earlier, technology changes all the time. How have those changes impacted the services that Nexus Innovation provides over the years?
So, because of our concentration on the Microsoft platform,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft has in the past had some packages that were on premise, sitting on the server down in the server closet. Obviously, everything's moved to the cloud,
Mm-hmm.
and from a new standpoint, and so we have had to adapt that and help our clients adapt to it because you have some definite pros and cons to that. From a standpoint of security,
Mm-hmm.
you now have a Microsoft helping you to keep things secure, where doing it on your own is can be pretty risky.
Mm.
You have a big change in that a cloud platform is updated by Microsoft almost continually.
Mm.
And so you have to be pretty light on your feet and ready to dance there as far as these changes come. And it's not always communicated the best. It's things, oh, there's a change. Wasn't expecting that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to adapt to that. And so there's a different mindset where in the olden days you could control things, say, no, we're not going to do an update for another 3 months, da 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 da, we'll hold that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's no longer an option.
So, what has been the biggest shift you've seen in the IT industry since you have started Nexus Tech and Innovation?
Definitely the transformation to the cloud.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Have you? How do you stay ahead of emerging trends in technology? Because I know you understand. I understand that you have been slowly transition your role to from from being president uh, to a lesser role now that your son is taking over. But I can help like to wonder how you stay ahead with how technology is changing all the time. There's emerging trends coming out every time. So how do you try to stay ahead in those roles in those things?
For me personally,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of reading.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, Lori and I, Jordan, we all love to read. Jordan shifted to a lot of podcasts. I've shifted to some audible books too, but um, podcasts like yours obviously are beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as expanding knowledge and keeping up on what are the trends, we're like any business these days where you go, okay, how are we going to be impacted by the latest election? How are we going to be impacted by the shift into AI? How are we going to be, all these things that are, they just come at you and you have no control over how fast they're moving and what it's going to do to your client base and so forth.
Yeah.
Uh, have to be ready to be very adaptable.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now let's change the conversation to reflection and advice. What has been the most unexpected lessons that you've learned as a business owner?
There's there's one that I'm going to go back to. I I never dreamed how important the personal relationships were in a standard business. I used to think, well, just put it out there and whoever gives you a lowest price, just do it. And it's easy. It's very black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it's so basic, but just understanding how there's so much more to it. And how does, the whole thing of the service that goes with it, all that. But really, so much comes down to when people make a decision, who is it they really trust and appreciate and enjoy doing business with.
Mm.
And so we developed a set of guidelines as to who are the customers we're looking for. And the way we ended up defining that was very simple. We're looking for those that with whom we can have mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual appreciation.
Hmm.
And when you have those three, 90% of your problems never cause a blip on the screen.
Hmm.
We've never been sued in 25 years. We've never sued anybody because our approach is, hey, if there's an issue, let's sit down, talk about it. You can work through a lot of things in a very simple, clean manner if there's basic trust that's been developed already.
Wonderful. I really, really like that. Um, if if the relationship is based on trust, it doesn't, small issues doesn't become a big deal. So would that be the advice that you give to someone who want to start looking into starting a business in IT, or would it be something else?
One basic I'd say is do not be afraid of starting small.
Mm-hmm.
And some feel like, oh, it's got to be some big success so fast and da 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 and so forth. A business usually takes longer to develop and get over the hump than you think it's going to.
Yeah.
So if you are able to, let's say you're going along and you're in your 20s and you want to have some dream to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
My first advice to people would be to go and start it as a side job.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also believe that most folks, their core business plan doesn't work out very often. Usually that business plan gets shifted, adapted,
Mm-hmm.
molded as you go along to something different.
Or whipped it off and then float away. Or
Yeah.
scared it.
Yeah, I can point to very successful companies, hugely successful.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily look that much like what they originally planned to be,
Mm-hmm.
but they were able to adapt.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, looking ahead now, what's next for the company? What's next for Nexus Innovation?
We in our conference room we have a little sculpture of the tortoise and the hare.
Okay, okay.
And somewhere around 20 years ago,
Mm.
we went and bought that. And we started bringing it to our annual meeting out in Medora. And we said, we are going to be the tortoise.
Mm.
We're not going to attempt to be the hare. And that has been very, very meaningful for us. In the IT world, my joke has been, well, obviously Nexus is a failure. We've been around 25 years and have never been sold.
Mm.
Because some people, the approach is build it to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And our approach has been build it to run it
Mm.
and to provide stability for employees, to provide stability for customers. Because when you have an IT partner, there's huge advantage if that guy that's helping you on that next phase of your project brings all sorts of historical knowledge to the table. That's a big plus.
Mm.
And there have been times over the past 5 years where there's been some pretty horrible turnover in our industry.
Yeah.
And all of us have turnover. That's a given. But some of the crazy days during COVID and so forth, and people were just flipping through jobs like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, that's gotten a whole lot more sane.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. This podcast is about helping young professionals launch their careers by giving them a window into the careers of those that are successful and doing great things in the community. And so, my very last question for you, I mean, the question before the last is, what advice would you give that college students or someone who just got out of college right now trying to find a career path?
I heard some advice not too long ago saying in your 20s, don't even worry that much about what company you're working for. Find a really good boss
Mm-hmm.
because that person is teaching you some core principles that will be valuable your entire career.
Mm-hmm.
So, secondly, though, finding a company with a healthy culture is huge.
Mm-hmm.
That can make so much difference.
Yeah.
And then my broader advice would be to be researching, studying, looking in all kinds of industries. Because I know for me, when I was in grade school, my teacher would say, "Okay, what do you want to be when you grow up?"
Yeah.
And my my outlook was so incredibly limited. And so you get old and you say, "Wow, the variety of jobs that's actually available
Hmm.
is just incredible."
Yeah.
And I really do encourage people, even if you have a full-time position with some company, be looking at what kind of things you can do on the side as far as uh, being an entrepreneur is such a phenomenal education.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if every employee that works for, say, a large company had been an entrepreneur at some point, I think they definitely become more valuable as an employee and be able to look at things from a broader perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
Deeper understanding. What does it really mean to have enough money there every month to make payroll?
mm-hmm.
That's a big deal.
Yep. They would take things maybe a little bit more seriously
Yeah.
in the company. Oh my goodness. So my last question is a question that I have been asking for a while now. Uh, Please tell me one thing about you that someone who work very close to you that know. It can be a hobby, it can be anything.
I love to garden.
Oh,
I
again.
love watching things grow, whether it be a tree, whether it be a carrot,
Mhm.
tomato, asparagus. It's incredible of God's beautiful creation coming up out of that ground. You have the frozen tundra all winter long,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you have these beautiful shoots coming out, giving that delicious food. It's pretty special.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Bob, I'm so glad that I have you on the podcast today. I really, enjoy knowing you, and yeah, I'm so grateful for Kevin for introducing us to, a few months ago, a couple of months ago, actually. And so we met, we talked, and I can see that I get to learn quite a bit from you. So it was really a pleasure to have you on the podcast today and share your journey, your experience with the professional launch audience. And hopefully, I get to interview your son because he's taking over the company, and I would like to a professional launch to have a relationship with Nexus Innovation as we develop the mentoring platform. And so hopefully I will be able to have him on some days.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Rico.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to be on your show, and you have excellent questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So I appreciate that. Okay. Now, I want to remind you guys that this has been a great professional lunch episode with Robert Pope. He is the co-president of Nexus Innovation, and so we are so grateful to have him here on the podcast today. If you have not followed Professional Lounge on social media, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook, find us and connect with us. We are currently working on a mentoring platform to connect young professionals with experienced mentors in the community. So when you support Professional Lounge as a nonprofit, you are helping us doing just that. You're helping us fuel our mission. So we thank you so much for your support. Now, this is the part that I tell you it's up to you to make today a great day. Have a great day.